Hello, everyone. Welcome to this exciting conversation on data privacy and security in the context of enterprise automation. I'm your host, Dinesh Chandrasekhar, founder and chief analyst at Stratola. I have two amazing guests joining me today, Amar Kanagaraj and Steve Shah. Amar is the CEO and founder of Protecto.ai, an AI guardrails company focused on preventing data leakage from your GenAI applications. Amar is a seasoned tech veteran who has held senior technology leadership positions at Sun Microsystems and Microsoft. He had also founded another company prior to starting Protecto. Welcome, Amar.
Thank you, Dinesh. Glad to be here.
Good. And Steve Shah is yet another tech veteran who has held senior tech positions at various companies like Citrix. He has founded companies, authored books, and done it all. He's currently the senior vice president of product at Automation Anywhere. Excited to have you on this episode, Steve. Welcome.
Awesome. Thank you.
So before we begin, let me set some context here. We are about to talk about two spaces that are converging, in my opinion. One is data security and privacy. The other is general automation, enterprise automation. Both these spaces are converging in a significant way as we get into the space about Gen AI and agentic automation and so forth. The reason why we are talking about it is there are multiple points of access to the general employee population in every organization into AI applications through LLMs, through agents, and so forth, by way of which suddenly the access to enterprise data as well as sensitive data suddenly becomes multifold. There is PII, personally identifiable information, and then in verticals like healthcare, we are talking about PHI as well. And some of these sensitive information can get easily leaked out if not well guarded within the context of AI. And as automation progresses into its next phase from beyond RPA into agentic automation and so forth, we have to talk about these guardrails. We have to talk about these protections that need to be put in place so that this sensitive enterprise data can be protected. So to discuss that today, we have two of these amazing guests from these exact same verticals that can discuss about these topics and can bring to conclusion about how we can look at this particular space and how we can be very well prepared. So let's start off this conversation with Steve. Steve, I know you have been at Automation Anywhere for the last almost 7 years now. Tell us a little bit about Automation Anywhere first.
Automation Anywhere is one of the leaders in agentic automation. We have a long history in automation as a whole. So being able to go down the path of procedural process orchestration, RPA, API-based automations, and so on. The company has been in business now since 2003, so it's a long storied history with a lot of focus and a significant jump in terms of the size of the business. Starting from about 2016, 2017. We've been doing tremendous. We've been AI focused now for over 2 years, and it's been an exciting journey.
Thank you. And for folks that are not aware of the space about automation, this is absolutely useful for verticals where there is so much of redundancy of work, where there is so much monotonous work, where humans are put to the same task over and over again without having any kind of value-added work. And automation practically makes this work absolutely easy. And companies like Automation Anywhere are taking this to the next level with robotic process automation and of course, with the introduction of AI as well. So Steve, with over the last few years, you've seen tremendous growth in this particular space in RPA. And as you rightly said, in the last couple of years with AI and AI agents and so forth. How do you see automation evolving, particularly in the context of terms like agentic automation, and what are some of the trends you've been observing in the space?
So agentic automation is sort of the macro trend. The larger idea of how do we go and embrace the ability to handle a much broader set of automations through being able to use language models for being able to handle a diverse set of prompts. So where we may have historically had to think through a lot of structured processes before we could get down to the point where we could actually automate a business process, being able to go and take something that was interfacing with a human and maybe through either a chat interface or something like that, automatically figure out what are the steps for being able to do that automation, connecting those steps into existing business processes and then triggering those business processes to run. This is a fundamental shift in the way that automation is getting built. And more critically, the scope with which the number of people that can interact with these automations greatly expands to this kind of interface. So we're seeing a lot of these automations move from sort of back office processing to now being able to be a part of the end user experience and something that you use on a day-to-day basis.
Thank you. So shifting gears to Amar. Amar, tell us about your company, Protecto.
So in terms of AI or any automation or any type of enterprise application uses ton of sensitive data, right? It can be a personal identifiable information, PII or PHI, or company sensitive confidential data, which are regulated, which are under contractual obligation. There are many different things that companies deal with today. How do you protect that data? Right? When I say protect, prevent it from leaks, prevent it from privacy violations, prevent it from compliance risks. Right? How do you protect the data while enabling innovation? You could lock the data, but that's not helpful for anybody, right? Company cannot use the data, they cannot extract value, their customers will not get the value. So Protector's goal is to protect the data while allowing innovation to happen, right? So we are a solution that is enabling AI, a trustworthy AI for the companies to adopt and extract value from their data. That's how we think about our role in this whole AI journey.
Fantastic. So let's start with some basics here. I mean, you mentioned data privacy and security. It is a broad term though, right? So what specifically are we focused on here, and what does data privacy mean to you?
Okay. Great question, Dinesh. So when you say privacy, it can mean many things, right? For example, you can talk about protecting the data privacy of the end customer from the context of it's leaking out to the public, to the context of compliance, where it is highly regulated like HIPAA or some regulation is controlling it. So how do you handle that data, right? The privacy can be wide. In the enterprise context, we have to first think about privacy as protecting individual rights. Number two is leaks. This can be your data getting leaked in the form of any kind of a data breach or intentional, unintentional leaks. Third is compliance. For example, HIPAA regulates how you handle PHI data. The regulations like CPRA, GDPR regulate how you store the data, how do you process the data, why you process this, and what rights you give it to the end customers. So they regulate it. So how you tackle that? That's from a compliance angle. And there is a data residency angle, where you store and process, who gets to see the data. For example, the regulations in India like DPDP, they control what kind of data can be transferred outside of the geography, right? So when you talk about general data protection, data privacy, I'll bucket it into if there is privacy, what type of individual protection you are giving to the individual customers, end customers. Number two will be how do you protect from the data leaks, intentional or accidental or malicious attacks. And the third is about compliance, right? It could be regulatory compliance on the privacy, or it could be on the data residency.
Thank you. I think that is a very comprehensive response for that question. But can we also try to like bridge these two conversations now? You know, Steve mentioned about like the automation advancements that are happening. So as automation expands, Amar, the need for robust security and privacy measures also grow, right? So
Yeah.
can you talk about the unique data privacy and security challenges that arise when organizations deploy AI models, LLMs, AI agents, and so forth? What's at stake here if these challenges aren't addressed properly?
Yeah, another great question, Dinesh. So one of the things that people should fundamentally understand is we are moving from a very structured, very defined environment to a non-deterministic world. The traditional applications are very predictable, right? You exactly know what's going to happen. When you do X, you're going to get Y. In the AI world, it's very non-deterministic. It could be the way you're building the application, how the LLMs are interacting, how people are interacting. It is not very non-deterministic. In this new world, if you put a data, you cannot say this is the output I'm going to get. This is how it will be controlled. This is how it will be used, right? So the control we had in the past doesn't exist in this new AI world. That's where products like AI guardrails like Protecto becomes very important. What we give the companies like Automation Anywhere or any other companies who are building AI applications or AI based LLM based applications, the critical control they need. So what we do is whenever the data comes in, we identify what is sensitive. We identify what is sensitive in that context, right? The context can be very different. So somebody in the healthcare might consider 10 or 100 things as sensitive. Somebody working in a marketing for another retailer might see things differently. So in that context, what is sensitive? Then masking it. When we mask it, it's not about redacting. Redacting will kill LLM accuracy because LLM is also, think of it like a human intelligence. They want to understand the data to process it. If you suddenly start removing a bunch of data from it, the data becomes incoherent and model starts failing. So how do you mask in a way you retain the value of the data? The LLM can process and respond to the question accurately. And when the answers come out in the response side, when the prompts come out, who gets to see it? Not everybody can, who's interacting with the model or the applications can see it. So you control who gets to see the actual data versus the mass data. So think of wherever the data is coming into the AI lifecycle, either through context or fine tuning, training, or processing, or retrieval, or in the process of prompts and responses, we help companies to control how data is consumed, how it's processed, and how it's being given out to in responses to the users. That's the control we give.
Thank you, Amar. So redirecting that question to Steve, then,
Yeah.
so when you talk about the same set of challenges when it comes to like AI models, LLMs, and AI agents that are being deployed, what are some of the ways that enterprises could be exposed to such risks, such as data leakage, particularly as how Amar described it, especially when you start integrating LLMs into workflows and stuff? How do you look at it?
Yeah, there's a couple of ways. So it helps to understand where AI ends up showing up in a lot of these things. So underneath, you've got a business process that you're trying to achieve. So you can either have AI at the beginning, where you have an agent that's figuring out all of the pieces and the steps that go into it. This is where you're exposed from the perspective of if somebody types in PII, you may not realize that they have entered PII. So you're counting on something like Protecto for being able to help you identify what that is and being able to protect against that data being leaked out to a third-party language model or to any other API services that might exist outside of the application itself. The next place is that as you're going through the business process and you're executing it with some kind of process automation, along the way, you may find it useful to use a language model for being able to interpret the data that you're seeing. When you see that data, that could also be full of all kinds of PII. So when those circumstances happen, you want to be able to use, again, something like Protecto to make sure that that data gets redacted before it actually goes out to a third party or stored to disk or something like that. The last place is actually in the platform. Any data that, the business processes invariably are going through highly sensitive data. They're going through customer records, especially in, say, healthcare, they might be going through your personal medical records, right? When that stuff gets hit, if you are saving that to disk somewhere, you're putting it in a database, you're putting it on a local file system, whatever it happens to be, that is another point where you have risk exposure. You want to make sure that you're not saving that material in a way that is not secure. A lot of the platform security comes into the picture here. So this is where regulatory compliances like SOC 2 and high trust come into the picture. But also, if you want to be able to selectively remove that data, we're using something like a Protecto for being able to do that data removal.
So I've been thinking about this concept of shift left, very much applicable in this particular context where I don't think data privacy and security, particularly when it comes to like AI and LLMs and agents, need to be considered after the fact. Rather, it should be like before the fact, even as you're like ingesting the data and you're sending it to LLMs and agents, you're already thinking about data privacy and security, protecting it. And then, like as you said, leveraging something like a Protecto to like do so.
Uh,
Is
you
that
know,
how you
yeah,
seeing it?
absolutely. I think that, Dinesh, this is the part where when you're actually thinking about what your processes are, you haven't even gotten to the point where you're looking at automation or language models. You may not even realize that AI is somewhere in this picture, right? That business process has a certain amount of sensitive data in it. And at that stage, knowing that you're gonna need to have steps where redaction is going to happen, or removal is going to have to happen, identification is going to happen, just knowing what that looks like ensures that from one stage to the next you're not going to go and expose yourself. So consider, for example, that you've got a stage where you are hitting a billing system. That billing system might exist in a different line of business. You may not know all of the details that go into it. At that point, you might say, you know what? I need to redact this before it hits the billing system because that billing system almost certainly goes to a third party. So the thought process absolutely should be at the design time, not something that comes up by accident while you're actually writing these automations.
Well said. Well said. So, Amar, that same point, when you talk about AI guardrails to enterprises that are looking to prevent such data leakage, can you talk to us about, some examples of how these guardrails function in practice? Like which specific teams would be like, taking this up? Is it like the engineering teams? Is it like the security teams? Who are most likely to like start thinking about it from design, as Steve was saying?
Yeah. Broadly, in terms of adoption or in terms of interaction, we said two broad set of teams. One is product leaders like Steve. They see this as a critical enabler, right? Privacy, security, and trust is a critical enabler of their AI features. So they build it along with their product, right? So they think, okay, if we want our customers to trust our AI and adopt our AI features, privacy trust has to be part of it. So Protector has to be part of it. So product leaders is one bucket. The second is there are a lot of data is being consumed in the AI applications, right? The data is the fuel, right? Without that, LLMs are smart intelligence, but doesn't have context. So data, it gives the context, like industry specific or company specific data is the context. So in that context, if you're transferring the data into AI, data teams are working on it in converting their existing data, which can be structured, unstructured documents. It can be many forms, or even in applications, data stored in applications. So all this data is being processed to be fed into AI, right? So we work with the data teams as well, right? To give an example, an automation here is a great example where that we have integrated guardrail into their AI feature itself. So if company, let's say I'm I'm a healthcare company in a highly regulated space. I want to use Automation Universe AI feature for my automation. Now they can meet the HIPAA compliance, meet the strict privacy regulation, and they have the confidence that the data will not be leaked by enabling Protecto guardrail when they interact with Automation Universe product. And whenever the data gets inside the automation, like Steve said, it can be coming from an API, it can be user uploading it, or user giving through a prompt. Protector will be sitting there, masking it and feeding into data. In the data world, I'll give an example. One of our customers, they are processing millions of medical claims, right? Insurance claims. In those medical claims, one of the problems they see is overbilling, right? It could be intentional, or it could be fraud as well, or it could be a unintentional thing as well, right? You have a cold, but you're getting billed for pneumonia, right? In those cases, how do you find this? So LLMs are the great fit for in this case. They can read through the description and say, hey, this medical code doesn't match. So they can identify. So to enable such a solution, they need to process all the health record. Then if we think about my first point that this is a very non-deterministic world, in a previous deterministic world or in a previous application, I can develop an application with the test data and release it. In this LLM-based, AI-based application, synthetic data cannot be created in this healthcare space because all the fraud, all the descriptions, you have to use the real data to find that. In that case, there are developers, validators, testers are all seeing the data, right? In addition to your regular users. How do you enable that? So the data team, what they did is they integrated Protecto. As the claims come in, Protecto sits in between the claims and the RAG, LLM based application, and removes all the sensitive data. In a way, it is consistent. We are not breaking the data. It can be 10 different claims having the same person, same ID. It will have to be consistent so that the LLM processes it and the users who are interacting with the system can clearly see wherever the fraud is happening, things like those. And whenever they want to really identify which claim has this problem, they can unmask it only for selected few. So in this case, at the time of ingestion, they are putting Protector to remove the PI, mask the PI, and at the time of working and developing, it all be masked data. Only when it is needed, it will be unmasked for very few selected users. That's another example. So we see both the worlds, product teams enabling guardrails and the data teams enabling data safely for AI features.
So there are a couple of things that I draw from your response, right? So one is that I don't think there is a particular vertical where you can say there is no PII or PHI that, I need to worry about this. I think it's practically applicable towards like all verticals. Every vertical has like some form of sensitive data or the other.
Right.
Now, the second point is that I don't think there is enough awareness and education in the markets today that people actually understand what kind of PII information exists out there within their own databases and data stores. Right. So one of the things I think you and I spoke about a little while ago was this notion of unstructured text could be a conversation with a call center operator with a customer, and that text probably, the call transcript is probably stored in some field within your data store, in your data warehouse, and that could possibly contain email addresses and login IDs and whatnot, right? And same thing goes for infrastructure monitoring text,
Right.
when you're looking at the space of observability and things like those. Again, those contain a ton of credentials and information like that could be hidden in there, that people don't understand that PII is like spread across your enterprise and that you need to be able to detect it, discover it, mask it, protect it, and make sure that it doesn't leak into your upstream GenAI applications and so forth. Would you agree with that?
Yes, Dinesh, depends on the industry also. I would partly I'll agree, partly I'll disagree because some industries are very strict about it, like healthcare. When we work with them, we need not educate about the importance of PHI, importance of compliance. They already know, right? And some global companies that operate out of European Union, they have some fairly good understanding of European Union GDPR laws and things like that. But what people don't understand is the risk in GenAI, because I know there is a data inside Salesforce, there's a data inside my CRM or any of Jira tickets, wherever, right? But it was very contained. Only way for me to interact is applications or interacting on top of these data. Now, once it's converted into some kind of a text and fed into AI, now the surface area is a lot bigger. That's where the education comes in. That's where we help customers understand the risk in your traditional and the AI is very different. Think about it. And here in a traditional world, you need not know where PI is and still be okay as you limit the access. I give only access to 10 people to my Jira ticket, I'm done. No access to APIs. Then I'm very contained. In this world, you are not contained. So that's another education we are doing, like, which is, hey, you might have been okay so far, right, without knowing where your PI page exists, what risk exists. But AI is opening up your surface area, right? That's where some of the education is going, and we see more of regulated industries like healthcare, financial services, and some retail health telcos. They have some good understanding of PI PHI risk currently, but a lot of education needs to be done. Yeah, correct.
So switching that same question over to you, Steve, business processes are practically across the organization, right? So cross-departmental and so forth. So in a world like that, data privacy is like the number one thing on top of your mind, probably, right? So how do you control that, and how do you educate uh, your own organization or like your customers that need to like consider this, or how do you implement that within Automation Anywhere?
I think I'll start with Automation Anywhere itself. One of the earliest things that we did when we started building out our cloud was actually set that culture of privacy first in the design. So it was privacy first before it was cloud first. And that thought process became instrumental because when we looked at things like who has access to the data, how does, if a developer wants to make a change, do they get to go and look at the customer data along the way? Setting a lot of those policies into place that prevent that kind of access, and then working with legal teams to help keep everyone educated about those contexts and different countries became part of how the organization was designed. So it was built into the very structure. So one of the things that surprises many of my customers is that our CEO, even if he comes and asks for direct access to the customer's data, he does not have access to it. I don't have access to it as the head of product for our cloud infrastructure. I have to go and work with our team that will go and write a script, extract out select data, anonymize it, and so on. And that has to go through a legal approval first. So that culture has to be baked into an organization. The second area is in part of our customers' environments, helping them understand data might get stored along the way. So data is going to end up getting transferred out to a third-party resource. Data is going to end up getting stored on some random disk somewhere. You're going to end up having a log file here, or you're going to file a support ticket with log data. That all has exposure. And helping everyone be clear about where is all of that going and what does that risk mean is a part of the security definition. So, for instance, one of the things that we spell out in our contracts with our customers is exactly what data goes back and forth between us. And it sets the conversation into motion to say, where else is that exposure happening? What other organizations are you dealing with? And to an earlier comment you had made, Dinesh, automation will stripe that data across a broad range of applications. So where in the old days it was vertical, all my Salesforce data stays in Salesforce. The whole point of an automation will be to pick up that Salesforce data and move it to somewhere else.
Mhm.
How do we make sure we're putting the right protections in place?
Very good. I mean, valid questions for organizations to like start thinking about when they implement something like this for sure. And I want to like touch on something that Amar mentioned a little earlier, which is Automation Anywhere has adopted Protecto recently, right? So how and where are you leveraging Protecto, and what is the intended benefit for your customers by leveraging Protecto?
Well, we've been partnering with Protecto to develop a redaction capability so that any data that goes in and out of, using a language model in and out of the agentic processes and so on are all secured. And so this is uh, it's baked into how we operate. So this is, not something that becomes an on-off switch. We want to make sure that there's clarity about consistent protection of data, regardless of wherever you go. For a lot of organizations that are really excited about the prospect of embracing agentic, or frankly, any kind of language model, today, a lot of them are held back because they're uncertain, they're unclear. What does this mean? What if one of my users types in data that they shouldn't? And so this becomes that final safeguard that says, even with all of the policies that we've helped you set up that controls who has access to what under what circumstance, in case something happens, you're still protected against that. One of the other benefits is protecting against toxicity. Sometimes, let's be honest about what a language model is. It is the statistical generation of text. if the statistics say that I'm going to go and say something terrible, right? Forgive me for putting on my geeky hat for a moment here, but I use a Star Trek example. Klingons are terrible fighters, right? That would be a toxic statement in the Star Trek universe. And that would be a circumstance where if the language model generated that as a response, I want that response to be flagged before I go and put that in front of potentially hundreds of people, right? Or heaven forbid, I go and send it to a customer. So those kinds of protections are just as important. You're not only protecting data going out, but you're protecting about what's coming back in.
I'm glad you didn't say anything bad about Vulcans. So, so let's talk about some actionable strategies here, right? So both of you had some really clear, clever points about your individual spaces of expertise and then how this alignment is coming together. So from your vantage points, and right, what are some of the best practices you would recommend for enterprises implementing AI guardrails? Where does one start? And how easy is it to adopt or implement this in practice? Steve, let's go with you since you were on a roll there.
Yeah, so this is something that, as I mentioned earlier, needs to be left shifted all the way into that design stage, right? As you're, everyone should be thinking about data privacy from the beginning because chances are there is some form of regulatory, matter that does apply to a company, right? And it could be, even at the most horizontal level, PCI. So if I have data about a customer, I probably have private data. Understanding where that goes and how that data flows is probably the number one thing that I ask my customers to think about because it starts identifying where they may have trouble spots and where they should be asking questions. The second area is any interaction with the language model has a degree of variability to it, right? There's a lot of capability with it, but with that capability comes risk. And so as they're thinking about all of the places where they use language models, having the necessary governance. So it's not just redaction and removal of private data, but it's also the overarching governance to say, who has access to these language models? Under what circumstances can they use them? Do I need to templatize my access so that I don't let people just send random things into it? These are all areas that have to get controlled as well. And based on those controls, you're able to apply redaction or toxicity removal or removal of PII altogether. These are all things that now become visible to the customer so that they're able to apply that in however they roll out their solution.
Thank you, Steve. Amar, any suggestions from you on best practices that you recommend?
I 100% agree with what Steve said, which is you have to think from the design, right from the design. It cannot be an afterthought. The risks and the complexities are so high. If you have the amount of rework you have to do once you develop a system, it can be a simple RAG like retrieval augmented generation or a complex AI agent or LLM train, whatever you have done, you're doing. If it has already PII or sensitive information has come in or a toxic content has come in, the removal part is very, very complex, right? Sometimes you might have to rebuild the whole thing, right? So thinking from the day one that privacy, security, trust, safety, and trust are important is critical. Understanding what kind of regulatory environment we are operating on, right? Is it what regulations apply to us? Because you may not be directly working, but if your customers are in healthcare and financial services, yes, your product will be expected to demonstrate HIPAA compliance or PCI, some compliance. So that's that Steve just touched on it. That's 100% we have to be careful. And on top of the top of the governance framework that Steve was talking about, understanding what type of products give you that control. Not every product, masking immediately sounds easy, it can be done, but giving a product that you're partnering with, like a guardrail or a security and a privacy product, doesn't give you the control and the flexibility to granularly control who has access, what policies apply, which context, what becomes sensitive, all these things You have the context and you have the control. That's another thing companies should think.
Awesome. And then when you spoke about regulations, one thing that came to mind is a question for you, Amar. Are there any upcoming regulatory changes or security frameworks that you feel like enterprises should be aware of that might impact, how they will handle data privacy and security in the context of AI?
Yeah. So, great question, Dinesh. I was on a panel the other day, again discussing on this very topic. The AI is so new and nascent. People don't know how to regulate, and they cannot form a framework around it, right? So the regulatory it got vetoed in the California vetoed by the California governor. So there's no clear regulation from a AI point of view, right? But there are very good frameworks, like OWASP came up with this framework, how to think about security in AI, right? NIST has a framework, risk framework. There are frameworks that you can take and apply to your context. I won't call them as a regulatory, that's not compliance and things, but this could become an industry standard. Then between companies, they might expect it. Hey, do you follow that? Right? Yes, we do follow that. Okay, let's share those. Like some kind of a framework and a standard, right? That will evolve, is my guess. Then, in terms of your existing regulations like HIPAA, PCI, GLIBA, those apply. Doesn't matter as AI, non-AI. If you're touching data that is regulated, your AI is also covered in that. So I would more focus on those, how my AI applications adhere to the existing industrial or industry specific regulations or country specific regulation. Data residency is super critical, right? Think more about that than the AI regulation that is coming. More AI frameworks will come, is what my advice would be.
Awesome. Thank you. And then one forward-looking question to you, Steve, is the future of agentic automation. I mean, everybody's like hot about it. Everybody has an agent for everything. So how do you think AI guardrails will evolve to keep up with that kind of rapid pace of automation in the enterprise?
I think it helps to first think about how does agentic evolve going forward, right? And we're going to see broader and broader use cases of it. More critically, the ability to go and tear apart a possible action into its component pieces. So you might have agents and then agents for agents and so on. So the sort of the depth of how agentic will get built out is really still maturing, and it's still in its early days. In all of those cases, deciding where you want your boundaries to be will be the real question for how privacy fits. If that boundary is at a sort of national level and you have a multinational system, where does that boundary need to go to make sure that data doesn't cross a boundary that it should not cross? Whether it is maybe across vendors, so it's leaving your organizational boundary, it's going to a third party, right? And it's not just to the hyperscalers for their cloud services, but it also could simply be to a third party that's providing a service for you, say a credit card clearinghouse. In all of those cases, those boundaries represent a place where you're going to need to think about privacy and make sure that it's part of the design, not an afterthought. The last place I'll bring up, and this is a little bit of a repetition of what I said earlier, and that is don't forget the platform. I think there's a tendency to overlook what is what happens to data at rest. Applications will invariably put temporary files down. They will put things onto disk, into databases, and so on. If you look at a lot of the security risks that companies have been exposed to, in almost all cases, it was data at rest that was opened up inadvertently because somebody wasn't paying attention to how to secure it. Does that need to be anonymized? Does that need to be redacted before it gets put down onto disk? Those are areas where there's opportunity for forward-looking thinking as well that goes beyond the agentic world.
Fantastic. So with that, I think we should bring the webinar to a close. This has been a fantastic conversation. It didn't even feel like a webinar to begin with. I think both of you had like some great points. about automation as well as data privacy and security. Thank you both for participating in this, and thank you for sharing your thoughts, and thank you all for attending it. I hope you all had a great time listening to Steve and Amar. Amar, Steve, thank you so much.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Dinesh. Thanks.